Hey everybody, Larry Bailey here, Awesome Technologies. Just making some final notes here before it started, and boom, we're live. It is April 16th, 2024. Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for coming. We meet every Tuesday, wherever I am in the world, at 4 p.m. Eastern, and we talk about everything happening in the community. I tend to have different types of community topics. And I don't know about you, but February, since February, it's been really bad to keep up with things. So one of the reasons why I found folks are having trouble keeping up with things is because they either have too much going on and it's hard to stay organized. That's generally me. They're overcommitted. That's generally me. And you're also doing some things inefficiently. And that's not generally me, but I feel like it has been that way over the last 45 days. And so I thought that today's topic of most common workflow review findings would be appropriate to go over, because these are things, I'm on fire. These are things that I generally find where it's kind of like, one of these days I'll get to talk with a therapist, and they'll tell me all the stuff that I do great for other people and I do crappy for myself. And so from a workflow review standpoint, I've been doing workflow reviews now really honestly since I got into mortgage industry without even understanding it. So back in '93, the workflow review that I did for the broker, I worked for PNC Bank in the tellers in the sorter operator area. And this is back when we used to do a lot of checks for everything. And so they have these huge machines. And so I figured out how to actually run that department the most efficiently ever in the history of the thing. And then I left there and got into mortgage processing for a broker. And I showed them how to go from using a typewriter to a Novell 5-user peer-to-peer network, and blah, 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 blah. And every place I go, it's always, I'm like, well, why don't we try doing it this way, or why don't we try doing it that way? And so that's what I wanted this topic to be really about, is what is everybody finding that they're, if you find things that you're doing in your company, in your workflow, things that are inefficient, or you think they're inefficient, what do you do about it? How do you manage it? And then I wanted to share some of the most common things that I find when I interview other companies. And these are companies literally that are as small as 5, as large as a few thousand. Most are on Encompass, but not every company is on Encompass. The most recent one that I finally got completed was a large company out of California who's on the Byte platform. And to me, it doesn't matter. The most volume of workflow reviews I've ever done was when I was working for Ellie Mae, and I was the implementation project manager, and I was doing workflow reviews because I'm implementing Encompass, right? And so if you think about it, when you do a workflow review, we'll look at, if you ever bought a business, you look at the business, or you're going to create a business, and you're going to look at the business. Well, what's the best way for me to do this? You also do this if you're moving into a new house or a new location. You're like, well, how do I go from point A to point B? When do I go there? For me, everything is workflow related, which is kind of weird. I know, but for me, it really is workflow related, and the best practices for what you find works. Again, you might not even realize it, but when you're asking somebody like, hey, how do you beat the traffic? It's a workflow question. So anyway, that's the topic. And again, for those that are showing up today, thank you very much. Does anybody have if anybody has any particular questions, feel free to throw them in chat. And if you want to come up on stage and talk through your workflow, I really want you to challenge me. You can ask me anything on what would I do for a particular workflow. I'd be glad to give you my thoughts on it. And then we'll kind of go from there. So feel free to use those as we go. And, and speaking of workflow, by the way, of course, in Encompass web settings, we have this thing called workflow tasks. That's where you can administer these things. You can use them in desktop, of course. But last year, when I really started promoting, starting to use Encompass Web and how do you use Encompass Web, I talked about workflow tasks a lot. I said, I've been telling everybody now for a while, 2024, you need to look at using Encompass Web settings for 4 main reasons. One of them is workflow tasks. And the reason why workflow tasks are so important is because it takes care of one of the most invasive, time-consuming, business-breaking activities that every single one of you on this call is doing. And if you're watching this replay, it's you too. And it's watching your Outlook. It's watching your friggin' inbox. I literally, 2 years ago, I did a time study to prove to the CEO of this company that the reason why the entire company was so lethargic was because they were all sitting in their email boxes waiting for something to happen instead of working out of Encompass. And I made 2 distinct changes in that workflow, and it resulted in a time savings of, it took about 3 weeks for them to collect documents from borrowers. It took them down to 3 days. And that change happened in the course of about a month. So, those are the Outlook problem is pervasive with every organization, hands down. Biggest problem you've got in your company right now for time wasting. And so the reason why I got on that tangent was because of workflow tasks.